Now, I want you to read this. This is a quote from last week. Craig Smoak to my right, Paul Catalina to my left. I want you to read a quote that was from Mack Rhoades last week, the Baylor athletic director, when he was on with us on Sikkim 365 radio. And this is the quote. I don't work this way. It's not through agents. It's Coach Aranda and I directly. He doesn't work that way. We've certainly, I don't know that I can recall and count them, but we've had multiple conversations about this program, the future of it, about him, the future for him and his family, assistant coaches, their future, and doing all we can do to be proactive and make sure that as best we can, we keep what we think is something really, really special together and consistent moving forward. That's from Mack Rhoades last week with us. There's a couple of other quotes as well. That is not from today, that's from a week ago. I'm telling you right now that I think Baylor Athletics Administration feels better today than they did at this time last week when it comes to the future of Dave Aranda leading the Baylor football program. Let me ask you this, guys. One thing that Dave Aranda has pounded in media sessions, post-game, and with the time I've been fortunate to sit down with him one-on-one is keeping outside noise out of the program. That could be moms and dads. That could be media. He actually brought up the media for the first time, I believe, in the game after the game against Kansas State on Saturday. That could be anything. Dave Aranda doesn't hang out on social media like some coaches do. That doesn't mean those who do are wrong, but that's not part of his MO. He wants the program to leave the outside noise outside. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's something you guys have heard. So if, in fact, for those who want Dave Aranda to someday come out and say, I am going to be the head coach at Baylor for the rest of my life, one, that may not be the case. Number two, what does he do if he comes out at any time, at least right now as the season continues? What does he do if, in fact, he comes out and says, I will remain the head coach at Baylor for the foreseeable future or for the next X amount of years?
Well, he sets himself up to be a liar. I mean, even if he doesn't intend it to that way, because what's true today is not always true tomorrow. And so if today that's what he believes, then tomorrow something can happen in his life. We don't know. Something can happen with one of those other jobs where he decides he really wants it. And I say today and tomorrow is loose figurative terms, but that's the case. It's really better not to say anything because people will not believe you anyway. Jimbo Fisher's done this 3 times throughout the year since Ed Orgeron's been fired. And even still, you see people going, well, Scott Woodward's still going to make a play for Jimbo Fisher.
And he specifically addressed even reasons why he would not leave, and yet there are still that bring him up as the leading candidate, or Dave Aranda, and or whoever else at LSU.
Yeah, I'm pretty over the whole thing, but I know it's going to continue on until every coaching job is filled. I again remain still more confident in seeing Baylor with Dave Aranda on the sideline next year than I do in not seeing it. That may have changed. The percentages may have dipped a little bit in regards to that just because more jobs have opened up and more jobs that have, some appeal to them that could be, up his alley for for example, the Southern Cal job because of the location, the LSU job because of obviously his history there and the fact that both are blue blood programs. LSU a little bit newer on that block than Southern Cal, obviously, but yeah, it's unfortunate. He's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. I mean, if he talks about it, then there's that outside noise that he tries to hammer home to his team that they need to block out. So he's contributing to something that he directly puts in their heads to not listen to, which would, obviously be a little backwards. And he can say something today, and by tomorrow, USC might call and offer him $15 million a year for all we know. And would anybody be upset or mad at him if he took a $15 million a year job? No, you couldn't be. You couldn't possibly be upset at somebody because you would do the exact same thing. And the only reason anybody would say that they wouldn't is because they're a Baylor fan who would love and die and do everything for that school. But that's not Dave Aranda. He's not a grad. He's not from Waco. He's a football coach. Those guys naturally just move around. So I think, Dave Aranda is going to have tons of possibilities thrown his way so long as he keeps doing what he's been doing over the course of this season and even last season, even though the record didn't indicate it. The seeds were planted last season for what they're doing right now. So it's just part of the deal. And you can make 2 choices. You can either, as a Baylor fan, get all worked up and bothered by every single report that you see, and you can take Clown Guy 43 as some sort of super secret inside source and just take every rumor that you read as fact and drive yourself insane. Or you can realize they've got a big game coming up this weekend, and Dave Aranda is going to be on the Baylor sideline. Beyond that, who knows? But for right now, he's the Baylor head coach, and I believe he's going to remain the Baylor head coach for the foreseeable future.
I'm telling you right now, I think Baylor Athletics Administration feels stronger now than they have felt even the last several weeks or even several days or even a week ago when it comes to Dave Aranda and Baylor. One other note, some of you, when I put up the guest list for today's show, and I got more, but some of you, when I put up the guest list for today's show, noticed, because he is clockwork when it comes to Tuesdays at 4:20, Mac Rhodes. There have been maybe every year 6 to 8 times he's not available. Couple of 2 or 3 of those times it's when he's at Big 12 meetings or something to do with what his other job is running, being a part of the Big 12. Sometimes it's because he's trying to get a break. Now, I do know this, that when he wants to take a break, all hell breaks loose, right? I mean, the Big 12 broke up, or the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma, and then some other things as well. I was told last week when we had Mac on the show that he was not going to be available next week. It's not because he thought there was something about Dave Aranda that he couldn't talk about. It's not because Texas Tech and Joey McGuire are on the schedule for Baylor. It's because he was going to have a day off, or at least get out, maybe get away just a little bit early, although he never gets to seem to do that.
It's Thanksgiving for everyone in the country.
No, it's not. Not when you have a coach that's on the,
Well, we get this too when we take days off. So it's Thanksgiving for everyone.
But I want to, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say this about Dave Aranda leaving. Most of the stuff you click on and read. There's a story going around from was the Advocate last night, Craig?
Yeah, so there was the Advocate had a headline, and I'm sure that the reporters, the first thing that they would do, and I haven't gone to check, but I'm sure for anybody who had criticism of the actual body of the article, it's the typical reporter thing. Oh, well, we don't write the headlines. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you tweeted it out and you know what the headline said, and the headline was misleading. The headline said that Dave Aranda was the leading candidate for the LSU job. You click on the article, which is what they wanted, so they got what they wanted, and there is no substance to what that said. There is nothing but just, he could be a candidate for the LSU job. That's all it said. That's all it said.
That was what it said below the fold.
Yeah.
So like when you click I'm gonna give you a little internet tutorial here. So when somebody sends you a tweet that says that with a picture and an article, all that, just click on the article first and read the first paragraph, because in the first paragraph will tell you what the article is really about. And that one, the second sentence was Dave Aranda may be the target. So they don't know. Yeah. If you're going to say may be the target, you know who else may be the target? Literally anyone who's a coach.
I feel like, depending on what happens this weekend, Baylor and Texas Tech, if Baylor takes care of their business, and if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, Baylor's regular season is over, and I think you're going to hear even more news on Dave Aranda and Baylor. If Baylor gets in the Big 12 championship game, perhaps that's moved back a week or two. But I'm telling you right now, he's not leaving Baylor. I think Dave Aranda is going to be here for a lot longer than most anyone thinks, and I do think this. I do believe that there's 2 or 3 times every day that Dave Aranda and Mac Rhodes are on the same page, or at least sitting down to talking. Armstrong, go to quote number 3. Go to quote number 3 if you can. It's the shorter quote. This is from last week. The one, you have all 3 on the same time? Okay. No.
That's you're looking at the exact thing that's on the screen.
Yeah, but I'm the one that it's a very short quote.
Right there. It's at the bottom.
Okay, at the bottom. Okay. Coach and I are going to continue to talk about the future of the program and his future and our assistant's future, and how we continue to make our program continues to grow nationally, continues to be even at a higher level when we think about national relevancy. I am telling you right now that Dave Aranda is not leaving Baylor. I think Baylor's going to take care of him. I think they'll take care of him as soon as Baylor's regular season is over, and they've already taken care of him. Mac Rhodes last week mentioned different parts of his contract, certain clauses in his contract that kick in. So I know that you're going to believe the national writers because they have more information than we do. And I already saw one of you on the board say that I was teasing everybody by saying, listen at 3 o'clock, that all we're doing is acting like you're dumbasses as fans. That's not what I do. I've never done that before, and I damn sure wouldn't come on here today and tease that we'll have information about Dave Aranda if I wasn't really sure about what I was talking about. Dave Aranda and Baylor are locked in. And that will also come about even more so whenever their regular season is over, in my opinion, from doing my due diligence. And if that's not enough for you, then I can't help you. Dave Aranda has told his team to leave the outside noise outside. Don't let it in. By even him coming on and saying anything to me or anyone else that, by the way, I am staying at Baylor, one, doesn't mean that's necessarily true. And number two, the most important part, because of the fundamentals of what his program's built on, is he's allowing outside noise to get in by even commenting on any articles about his name and a school. 254-339-1122. The chat room is open as well.
On the text line, we got a call, too. James says, I feel like there are way too many high-profile jobs open to keep Aranda in Waco. If Riley stays at Oklahoma and Campbell at Iowa State, which they've been there longer, then we're toast, and that's from James. James, I'll tell you this. I think the reason, and I'll use USC as an example, the reason that USC is kind of hard to pin down is that since Pete Carroll, they have not kept people there. Look, Lane Kiffin was there, and they ran him out. And part of the reason they ran him out is I don't think Lane Kiffin really wanted to be there once he got back. Steve Sarkisian probably still would be there if not for his personal problems, but he had that happen. So USC for a long time hasn't known what they're doing, which means that it is not as easy as stepping into a situation and going, okay, this, and that. There's a lot of things under the surface at USC that really have nothing to do with the football coach. LSU, not quite as much. I mean, that's probably a little easier one. But, for example, Florida's a high-profile job. Florida's problem has gone back 3 coaches as well. So you can't just automatically think that you're going to step into a job and save it when 3 coaches have been bad. And if you're Dave Aranda, every coach that's been here before you, at least in the immediate, that you can, people can remember, has been successful. So staying here is the smarter play than going and trying to jump in the deep water.
I said this on the podcast earlier today. I don't want to hear anybody talking about like if they lose Aranda as though the program's going to fall apart, because you could have said the same thing after Art Briles left and Matt Rule won 10 games 2 years later. You could have said the same thing after Matt Rule left and Dave Aranda's in line to win 10 games 2 years later. So is it the program or is it the coaches? I think it's both. I think they've hired 2 really good head coaches since Briles' departure, and I think that they would find another really good head coach if Dave Aranda were to leave. Do I think Dave Aranda's leaving? I'm not nearly as confident as you are, but I also don't talk to the same people. I think he's staying and he will be here next year. I do believe that. Beyond that, I have no idea, and quite frankly, I don't even care at this point, because we're going to cover a football team regardless of who the head coach is, just like we've done before Aranda and like we'll do after Aranda. I think he's a fantastic head coach. I think they're going to be big winners so long as he's around forever, however long he's around. And I hope it's a long time, because I think he's different in the best kind of way from the typical college football head coach. So I think they have something very unique, but you can understand why that uniqueness would be appealing to people on the outside. And it's just funny to me, like, this is just why college football is the way that it is. This is why the Blue Bloods are always the same Blue Bloods over and over and over again, because every time that they start to suffer a little bit, they go and grab the head coach from whoever's the hottest, lesser program. And I said this on the podcast today in regards to Aranda and possibly winning 10 wins like 2 others did right before him. If he leaves, not only do I feel confident that Baylor would find a good head coach, but I also think he's a great fit for Baylor. But at some point, and I think Art Briles did know this, and it just, the ending wasn't, his choosing. It was something that was completely outside of anything he could control. I think that somebody is eventually going to realize, hey, man, you ever notice how down in Waco, like, they're not lacking really in anything? They're building new facilities. Did you ever notice that, for a program that not many people thought would ever be worth an S, Art Briles went down there and won 2 Big 12 titles and 10 games on multiple occasions, a Heisman Trophy, and I think everybody would be in agreement and would really be lying to themselves if they don't think that Art Briles would have gotten them into a playoff in the next 5 years, had he not been fired. I think we can all agree that would have probably happened. So he did that. So after that, it's like, well, now they're screwed. So what does Matt Rule do? Matt Rule just comes in, has a bad first year because he basically forces a bad first year in many ways. Turns around, wins 7 games in a bowl game, turns around 2 years later, playing for a Big 12 title against Oklahoma, playing in the Sugar Bowl. He leaves. Oh, man, they're totally screwed now. They're totally screwed. They're not going to be able to make up for Matt Rule. Here comes Dave Aranda. First year, COVID year. kind of self-inflicted in some ways. A year later, they're in line to win 10 games again. So eventually somebody, whether they have Texas ties or whatever the case may be, is going to be smart enough to realize, like, hey, imagine if somebody actually stuck around there for a little while. Imagine what could be accomplished rather than doing what every other college football coach does and just chase money and prestige because a bunch of coaches before them, created prestige and tradition at a bigger school. How about creating tradition at a different school? Everybody just jumps to the blue blood, and I get why. And look, eventually Aranda's probably going to jump to a blue blood as well. But there's all the makings to create a new one where he is right now. And if he doesn't realize that, but I think he does because he's smart, that may still not be enough. But for somebody eventually, I have to think that it will be. And when that happens, I think it's going to be a really good spot for Baylor.
One of the note that we got a bunch of calls to get to. Dave Aranda, the last thing he wants is anything to be said about him. The last thing he wants is attention.
Oh, I can tell you as somebody that's that way. I can't even imagine how much that's probably driving him nuts. I would be going insane being mentioned as much as he is right now.
And for him to even bring it up, I'm going to go back to what I said before. For him to go and bring up anything about his future with Baylor or any other opportunities out there is the one thing fundamentally within his program he has told his players, his staff, and anyone associated with it. Here's who needs to know: his players, his staff, and the commitments. That's all that matters. And I know you can speculate, and I know you can let an article because of who wrote it or where it's from. One of the other things that I want to say about this is that I see a lot of this, well, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, or that's not, but then a national story comes out and oh my God.
Oh man, you fawn
just
over
like you hate
Pete
ESPN,
Thamel.
but if ESPN writes a story, you go nuts over it. Like you're like, it's like, oh my God. And what I'm saying is stop reading the clicks and views. Stop. And I'm not saying you will, and that's fine. And I'm not just someone said I'm being condescending. No, I'm not. I'm trying to be truthful. I do my due diligence. How many times do we have to tell you that? Paul, Craig, we all do. Dave Aranda is going to be taken care of. He's not going to leave Baylor. I'm not saying in the future. I'm talking about in the immediate future. He's not going to be anywhere but Baylor in 2022 and might be much longer than that. Paul, go to the calls.
All right, boom.